Go. They say that a one-eyed person in the land of the blind will be king. Why? Well, it's pretty obvious, right? Because he can see. It's also said in the Proverbs, where there is no vision, the people perish. Think about that. Helen Keller said, no pessimistic person ever opened the secrets of the stars or charted uncharted land or opened new heavens to a human spirit. Why? She was blind, yet she had vision. And let's remember, the Stone Age didn't end because there wasn't enough stones. Why did the Stone Age end? Vision. Vision. Winston Churchill said, the empires of the future will be empires of the mind. You see, we must learn to see beyond ourselves. We must learn to see beyond even the stars, because that's what true vision is. Vision. Welcome to the deep end. How are you, Mary Anne?
I am ready to dive into the deep end.
There you go. There you go. The whole concept of vision and being a visionary, it's a concept. And there's all kinds of different ways of thinking about it. When we think of vision, it's very clear. It's to see. And yet there are all kinds of ways of seeing. Of course, there's the kind that Helen Keller didn't have, and that's with her eyes. But yet she could see something beyond not seeing. And that's what we want to talk about today. Who is the visionary? What is this thing called vision? It's called, if you look up visionary on the internet, it basically is one who can envision the future. And for some groups, this can involve the supernatural. We can get into all that, but I'm not going to, because there's too much real stuff going on right here. Visionaries. This whole concept of the human race, we need these people. So the visionary is one who can see past themselves. They can see past even seeing into something else. And today, I'm concerned that we don't have the kind of visionaries we need, but we have an abundance of visionaries. And this is why we need you, all you listeners, to become visionaries. So, what kind of visionaries are there? I mean, when we think of it, mostly we think of mystics, right?
Yeah, I think
religious.
Well, and I think but I'm out there in the business world too, and so there's a lot of visionary language that goes on within businesses, even. But to me, it's kind of seeing things that aren't quite formed yet, but there are possibilities, and
yes.
How do you grasp onto that? And
yes.
Is it mystical, or is it,
and that's part of the thing, is
right.
There's all kinds of mystics. There's business mystics, there's scientific, not mystics, but visionaries. There's business visionaries, there's scientific visionaries, and there's technological visionaries.
Right, and we all can have a vision for our own lives.
So, when we think of the mystics, let's go right to Jesus and Buddha and the prophets. We quoted from the Proverbs, there can be no future without this vision. So there's that piece. There's the political. John F. Kennedy. We are going to the moon within the next decade.
Oh, my goodness. I've been watching the Kennedys series.
Exactly. And MLK, there's been a whole series of those. I Have a Dream. He was a mystic. When we think of science and technology, Carl Sagan, Steve Jobs, Leonardo da Vinci, Edison, and I'm going to suggest, someone I've been reading is Mikhail Kaku, who has written quite a bit on the future and what is happening and what we can expect. This whole concept of visionaries is important. It gives us a tomorrow worth living. And that's part of the whole concept of being a visionary.
And something to work for.
And something to work for. So how does this visionary thing work? First of all, let's go to the human mind, because let's face it, we all are living in our own human minds. If you have a dog next to you, they're listening to this, but they're only picking up a word or two like sit, come. They might pick out a few words. But my point is, and I'm just being facetious here, is that there are these pieces of the way the human mind works. And the way that is basically we think in stories. It's just what we do. We think in narratives. We think in images and analogs and metaphors. We compare patterns with each other. And this is the way a lot of visionaries talk. They talk in metaphors because what they're describing many times is what is not yet. So all we have is a metaphor for it. The airplane was not called an airplane. It was called bird-like. Think of the metaphors. When a Native American who had never seen a train before come across the prairie, they saw it as a dragon that would devour people and poop people out. It's the way we talk about the world is in these metaphors, analogies, images, stories, and narratives. And some have even said that the story is the human data storage and retrieval system.
It's our repository for all of the things that we know and are looking for.
And exactly. And so how are we talking to ourselves today about vision? Movies, books, songs, stories,
poetry.
These are pieces that are important. I mean, think about the way we talk about the earth. We talk about the earth as being our mother. We refer to her as her. We've created this anthropomorphic personifying piece that we have done, and it's important for us to do that. And if you don't think that's important, we've done it today more than we've ever done it. I mean, you turn on your TV and you have your colon following you around. You have your mucus haunting you until you take the right medicine.
Oh, and it's all about the medicine.
Well, and it's about the animation, and that's the point I'm going for here, is that we are animating the world. We always have been. We continue to do so. Animation is a whole film genre that we use, and today half the movies we see are really computer-generated stuff that is literally realistic animation. So my point is, these are the languages. This is the way that the visionary arts, if you will, work. So who becomes the visionary? How does this work? And I think that's an important piece. Now, if you go online, you'll see things like meditation, dreams, both waking and sleeping, drugs, art, and it's just part of your nature. Some people see Teresa of Bingen, or was that her name? The saint who was a visionary. She could see inside a cow. She could look at a cow that was pregnant and say that cow can't give birth because the calves turned wrong in her womb, and then she would reach in and rewrite it. It's an amazing thing. Let me see if I can find her name. I can't, so I'm not going to even try. But my point is that there are all these ways. And if you don't think, drugs play a part, I'm only going to say this, and I'm not suggesting that anybody use any drugs. But Freud used cocaine a lot. The guy, Crick, who discovered DNA, he had taken LSD. Edison used to take these cocaine elixirs. Stephen Jobs, we all know he took a lot of LSD. Even Bill Gates took LSD, although he saw it as part of his youth gone wrong, if you will. And there was a guy, a psychologist, John Lilly, who was taking not only lots of LSD and studying it, but doing it in deprivation chambers. And a lot of you who are into physics know Richard Feynman's work. Lilly talked him into taking LSD, getting into his deprivation tanks, and using cannabis. And, of course, we all know that Carl Sagan actually stated that he was an avid cannabis user. So they're part of the picture. Something's loosening them up. And I'm going to suggest, if you look at Grandis, Temple Grandis, she is an autistic woman who got her PhD and is now teaching agriculture and husbandry sciences. She's a visionary, and she's autistic. And I'm going to suggest a lot of these people that I just mentioned might have some autism. So maybe that's a source of our visionary arts. But this is an important thing to see, that our visionariness, if you will, is integral to the human family.
I agree that it is, but I don't necessarily think that there's only one way to foster that.
Oh gosh, no! It's like I said. There's meditation. There is it's your nature. And I'm just suggesting.
And float tanks.
Float tanks.
I'm going to put in a little plug for
and that's
floating.
Deprivation.
Yes.
That really comes out of the whole deprivation movement. And John Lilly, if you really want to get into the float tank, study John Lilly. Mary Anne, I've got a couple of his books upstairs. Blow your mind. What he was doing and the spirit beings he was meeting when he got rid of all the sensory stuff and was in getting his front brain offline. Very interesting reads. Very interesting guy. That's a dude I'd love to have coffee with. So my point is that this is there are all these ways of accessing it, and shamans have been using substances. They even say the Vedas had their original beginning out of the ingestion of a soma. So, again, I'm not suggesting that, but I'm just saying that's integral, and our society has put such a negative thing on it that I'm trying to give some symmetry to it.
Gotcha.
And I'm also pitching meditation. I'm also pitching lucid dreaming. If you haven't studied lucid dreaming, I'm telling you, man, when you wake up inside your dreams and you start walking around, you can fly. Lucid dreaming is a trip. And I spent about 4 years working in that, and I loved it, but it took a lot of effort, and you have to pay a lot of attention. So, and today, what's going on is that we have a real need and a skew, if you will, in our visionary arts. Our visionary arts are skewed to science and technology today. Again, when we did the show on science and religion, we talked about science being descriptive and religion being prescriptive or aspirational. So once we have all the science, and that's why I talk about here we're doing metaphysics, once we have all the physics, what do we do with them? What does it mean? And that's part of what religion was originally a part of before it got so messed up, when it was really about relinking, about hooking up all the noticings and projecting them into a moral future that includes everybody.
Right.
And this is the dream. This is the dream that everybody from Gandhi to the Dalai Lama to Martin Luther King to Jesus and the Buddha to Lao Tzu, all of these human beings talked about this place where we all sit in a circle and have a say.
And that we all have access to that place.
And we all have access. But there's a tool in the human tool belt that is so in need within the context of our visionaries today, and that is empathy. I posted on Facebook, there can be no vision without empathy. And so let's just review what empathy is real quick. What it is the ability to imagine yourself in someone else's position and to intuit what that person is feeling. Now, this is not feeling sorry for someone, but feeling with someone.
And it's crucial.
It's crucial. You're not feeling sympathy. That's when you see someone else that's feeling bad and you feel sorry for them. That's not what this is about. This is getting inside them and walking with them. This is basically attuning oneself to another. And here's what the visionary does. And this is why they're called mystics so often. And I think there's a mystical quality, because it's not just getting inside and tuning oneself to another, but tuning oneself to the world. And I've talked about the internet is becoming a hardwiring of the nervous system of the human planet, and that we are now able to tune ourselves to the world. And it's huge. I mean, you got to pay attention. And again, not everybody's going to do that. There's a lot of people right now, America's going through a story. I know people who are veterans, and they're not even following the story of America right now, where the Congress is having to protect the judicial branch from the executive branch. This is the first time in my life where all three branches, well, probably Watergate happened, where all three branches were really being tested. And the philosophy behind our Constitution is being tested. And yet, I know veterans that aren't following this story one bit. And yet, they served the very thing that is now being threatened. And they don't seem to care. It seems to be a side story in their life. And I go, wow, how does that happen? And then I realize, again, not everybody is leading an examined life. Not everybody really gives a damn.
Well, I mean, it's not only that it's being tested, but we're also seeing it in real time play out, what is important, and the wisdom that was put into those three branches, those separations. And that's the conversation I think that we are starting to finally have is this something worth preserving? And there are people who don't think so, and there are a lot of people who think that it is.
And this is beginning to understand the vision of our founding mothers and fathers.
Vision is right.
Because the Constitution was a vision, and it was a vision that came out of human beings looking for greater justice and a fundamental fairness. That's called due process within the context of law. But it's basically just fundamental fairness. And yes, the system is flawed. It's flawed on every front. And yet, America is still a vision we are reaching for. We are not yet done. I've talked about the three orders of wonder. Being, life, and consciousness. Consciousness isn't done. It's not done. And we are it. We are the growing edge. Some have said we are the growing edge of God herself.
Well, we have an opportunity right now to shape our future with what vision with a vision that we want to create.
With a vision we want to create. And, in Keku's book, it's called Physics of the Future, How Science Will Shape Human Destiny and Our Daily Lives by the Year 2100. But the whole thing is, in his vision, he ends up at the very end. And this is where I want us to finish our little dance of our conversation. And he said, in the midst, the person that he's talking about, in the midst of all the changes in the great society that they're now a part of, she takes out an old worn book from her back pocket, and she reads these words of someone who died more than 100 years before her time. And this person is now living in the 21st century. And it reminds her of the challenges that are facing humanity before it really does get to this point that he calls a planetary civilization. And in that little book she pulls out of her back pocket, it's got a quote by Mahatma Gandhi that says, "The roots of violence." And he says, wealth without work, pleasure without conscience, knowledge without character, commerce without morality, science without humanity, worship without sacrifice, politics without principles. That is a vision for the human family, for all of us. It's a secular vision that has its roots in all of science, all of religion, all of spirituality. You see the new myth in that basic statement. You can see it on the horizon of our mindscape if you can close your eyes and dare to share the waking dream that John Lennon talked about in Imagine. And it is a waking dream. My friends, we are it. We are the people, the ones we've been waiting for. So what are we going to do? I'm going to Disneyland. No, that's the American response.
Have a nice trip.
But Disneyland loses something when you realize the people are no longer free. You know, I know people now who are on the right, and I'm not a Democrat. I'm a lefty for sure, but I'm an independent. But I know people on the right who now say we got to get rid of this liberal democracy. And the only reason they're saying that is because it has the word liberal in it. They don't understand what it means. It means a free press. And I say, you say we should get rid of a free press? Well, no, I'm not saying that. You're saying we should get rid of the freedom to gather as a people? No, I'm not saying that. You see, this is what's happened to us. We've lost our vision. We've lost something that has kept us true to ourselves. And that's the scurrying right now. If you turn on 24/7 News, you're seeing people scurrying to try to re-find that peace that defined us all. And now you see two different interpretations. Google SoundCloud, and look at the difference of the SoundCloud from the right and the left on different issues of justice, of freedom. The words in that SoundCloud are very different. On justice, on the left side, it's equality and words like that. On the right, it's an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth language. It's an amazing piece, the divide among us as a people. And what's happening in America is what's happening in the world, and what's happening is a lack of vision. So where are we going to get the vision? Well, I'm going to suggest it's where I've been talking about all the time, empathy and the positive emotions. So how do we grow those? How do we create a social field of visionary art?
With action.
Well, it's got, and maybe the
Right.
first piece is people protesting. We might not know how to make a stand for what it is we want, but we can now make a stand for what it is we don't want. We don't want our women to be subjected to sexual harassment. We don't want our children to be afraid to go to school. We don't want to be afraid to go to a concert because somebody in a high hotel is going to be shooting at us. I don't want to be afraid of other white men who are carrying, concealed weapons.
Right. But I think the vision part of it comes from, what do we want? We want safety for our children. We want equality for everyone in our society. Where do we want to go? And I think that that whole idea of, if we don't have a vision of what it is we want, we're never going to create it.
And, if you look at the roots of violence, and again, go to Mahatma Gandhi's Roots of Violence, and you can get the list. It talks about wealth, pleasure, knowledge, commerce, science, worship, and politics. But we need to define what work is, what conscience is, what character is, what morality is, what humanity is, what sacrifice is, what principle is. These are the pieces that we seem to have lost. And I mean, William Sloane Coffin in the 80s was spitting mad when he talked and preached about, do you think God's going to let us get away with this? There's a yellow streak running down America's back. We're turning our back on all that Jesus told us to face head on. I mean, we are lacking vision. And I'm hoping here at the Deep End, we're not only giving a little vision, but we're also inspiring some vision. And if not, let us know. redhawkthedeepend at gmail.com. Again, redhawkthedeepend at gmail.com. I would love to hear from you, especially because we're all in this together. It's a conversation. It's not just between Mary Anne and me. It's between all of us. And I think the right wing has some of these answers, and I think the left wing has some of these answers. And I think we're both a bit blind right now. And we really do need a one-eyed person, probably a woman. Maybe it's a one-legged person. Tammy Duckworth. Something about the
to
first
lead the march.
The first woman senator to give birth as a senator. I just go, God, I wonder if she named that child Justice or Justin.
That would be a good name.
Yeah, it would be a great name. And I'm an optimist. I think Helen Keller said it beautifully. No pessimist ever discovered any of the secrets of the stars or has created uncharted land or opened new heavens to the human spirit. And she was blind as a bat. It's just amazing to me how she was able to see it. And I'll be honest, right now, it's hard to be optimistic. It's very difficult because
you have to work at it.
You have to work at it. And, someone said online, joy is a choice. I went, that's a bunch of crap. Joy is not a choice. It's a response to something that's happening. And what's happening right now is nothing but the proper response is despair almost. And yet despair can't be what rules us because it's not going to get us out of it. So what do?
Right. And that despair can lead us into some really dark places. And so how do you counter that? How do you take that? What is happening? And you look out and you see so many places where there are things that are falling apart and you want to see change. You want to make change. So how do you pick your pony? Where do you go to give your life purpose and meaning and have a vision for what you want the rest of the world to look like? And I really do believe that it starts with each one of us individually. And once we can all share a vision, then we can create something different. But those words that you read, the right and the left, those words have become redefined by each side. And so they take on different meanings. And that's what we're missing. I think we're missing a shared meaning. We don't have that anymore. Our language is falling apart as well.
And this is where myth comes in, because
right.
What we're looking for is not a new American story. America's got its story. We're looking for a global story that makes America light up and that makes all the other countries light up within the context of what their humanity is about. Now, you talk about, and I'm going to suggest, because I am an optimist, I'm deep in the despair, okay? But in the midst of all this dark, I've got my little light, and it's cool. I've got it, and I'm gathering with as many other people with their little lights. So where do we see this human vision? Man, go to movies. I'll be honest, I'm almost done with Leonardo da Vinci. I know I've been harping a long time on that book, but my God, has changed the way I see the world. He couldn't see anything without seeing something new in it. And he saw a humanity that was growing out of something beyond the church and its dogmatic theologies. And the thing about it is the church was even financing much of the studies and the arts and the sciences that were undoing itself. So today, what do we have? I'm going back to, like the Avatar. I'm going back to, I don't have to go back. Let's go right to the Black Panther. Let's go to Wonder Woman. Let's go to The Hobbit and the whole series. These are stories about the human being, about who we are and how we are. I mean, what is the human's role in the midst of all our diversity on this planet? Go to The Hobbit.
The hero's journey.
The hero's journey. Think of the elves. Think of the dwarfs. Think of all the different kinds of beings and how they're trying to get along. And those beings that are life beings that just want life and peace and fairness against those beings that want to consolidate all the darkness powers to control, and I'm putting quotes on that, everybody else, instead of trusting each other and having a circle. And I'm talking about a vision here. This is a vision that we're seeing, and it comes out of, Northern Europe. If you look at the whole Hobbit story, it's the underworld and everything. It's the whole mythic reality that comes out of the Vikings and all their stuff. Finland and Norway and all those Viking places where Metal Rock is still king. Sci-fi is huge. The Star Wars myth and story is literally acting out the human soul. You talk about the hero, the hero's journey. Hero with 1,000 Faces, that's where Lucas, he read that book, and then he wrote the first 3 of those with the others in mind, which have gone somewhere else.
Well, and that's where vision can be made manifest, because it doesn't have to be reality right now. It can be something that we're imagining, and that's where the vision for the future comes from.
And the word that is used that I've read a lot is aspirational. What do we aspire to? What would the human family look like? And this is in Keku's book, what he talks about. This, we are really now in the first throes of a and I've used this phrase before, a painful labor and a difficult birth of a global civilization. And it's going to take hundreds of years to give full birth to that. We'll be technologically and scientifically way ahead of ourselves. And I think that's, the thing I read about the roots of violence really is the end of his book, where we've made all these scientific and technological advances that have hooked us up, and yet we're still struggling for this civilization of fundamental fairness. So, what do we do? How do we do it? Well, my friends, welcome to you. Welcome to you. All the visionaries out there. I'm always pitching my own little vision of things. And I want all of us to create small groups to gather, talk about your visions, talk about your aspirations, and talk about the despair that we need to leave behind that's creating the suffering for more and more people. It's important. Mary Anne, what's your aspiration? Any final comments on this aspirational visionary thing?
Well, even those conversations that we can be having, I heard someone say today that don't discuss politics or religion. And it's like, there's nothing else worth discussing as far as I'm concerned, because those are and those small groups can be our own families. And so if you can learn how to communicate your vision with others that don't share that vision, possibly, then that's the next step, I think, for all of us.
And to realize that there are probably not going to be any giant leaps,
right,
of humanity. There'll be small baby steps that prayerfully one day we'll look back and we'll say, wow. And I'm going to leave us with a wow. And I've used this before, but in all the problems and stuff, when I was a child, over 50%, or just a little under 50% of the world was in abject poverty. Today, only 10%. Wow. Think about it. What aspirations led to that? What in the human family? And I'm going to suggest part of it came from the Marshall Plan. For the first time, we didn't subject those that we defeated. We used them as seeds to create new ways of being in the world that were part of a liberal democracy, part of a vision that our founding family created.
And that we're all created equal.
Amen. And without equal opportunity, there is no way that we can define that. And there I leave you. There I leave you with the roots of violence and turn you towards tomorrow. So what about this show? Where are we going next week? We really would love to hear from you. redhawkthedeepend at gmail.com. We're going to try to address, I've got a few questions that people have offered me, and we're going to try to address those. Every 15 episodes or so, we'll try to consolidate our questions. So what are your questions? Because to be honest, We are the quest beings. We are the one piece in nature that is reaching beyond itself and creating a new being all the time. A new being. Some used to say, I'm a new person in Christ, or I am remade as the Buddha, or Tai Chi has showed me the Tao and the Chi, and I can now move with it. How do we find this part of ourselves that is enduring, that is asking the questions? We invite you to do that. redhawkthedeepend at gmail.com. Please, God's peace, please keep your heart open to the vision that is tomorrow.